promised each other, so we can do that. But before we do that, we look at what we did the last time, if we still remember this, and if there are still some questions concerning what we did the last time. So we are in discourse number 1 we had, and then we had discourse number 2, and let's see what else we had here. Discourse number 2, and then I think today is discourse number 3, is that right? Yeah, that's right. Okay, discourse number 3. And let me see if I have. The last time, some of these things are missing there, but you don't really need them in your what we call the roadmap, right? Okay, but then I need. Let me see. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Okay, so I hope we all have the roadmap now, and we all have the syllabus. And I think we did the mutual introduction, and I told you something about myself. And in the syllabus, I think we did not talk about the mottos there, which are above. Maybe we can just mention them. So we have the Heracleitos there, Heracleitos, the Greek philosopher, and he lived from 540 to 470. So he became how much? 70 years old. And before the Common Era. And he is interesting because he is a philosopher of becoming. So that means he elevated the principle of becoming, and that went through the centuries, and Hegel was the Heracleitos of the 19th century, and Marx continued this Heracleitos thinking. So, and what is the opposite of it? You find it in Hegel's philosophy of Hegel's logic. So it starts out with being and nothing and becoming. So being comes from Parmenides, which is another philosopher, who taught that being is and nothing is not. When you say that, you exclude becoming, because becoming is the continual change between being and nothing. So you have sex, you put a little embryo into the existence, and then you annihilate it again. That whole process is a process of becoming. There's something being, and it's made into nothing again, and so on. Now, sometimes we think, that these abstract ideas and so on have nothing to do with normal life. In reality, they are extremely political. So these philosophers were not low-class people. They were upper-class people, and they represented the Greek slaveholder system and so on. So or the Athenian system or the Spartan system and so on. And people, when they want to develop a state, with the ruling class, then they want to have stability. They don't want to think of becoming. As a matter of fact, when you think of becoming, you become a traitor, because the state started somewhere, but you also think that the state may disappear again, and that is very dangerous. So if you translate this back from philosophy into mythology, then you have Kronos, the god of time, and Kronos, that's from Chronicle and all this. Then Kronos was this guy who produced things and annihilated. He produced his children and ate them up again. So that is the same thing in mythological language, which we then have in philosophical or metaphysical language, and which then we can also have in scientific language. So therefore it is very important that we know, when we say, for instance, Heidegger, Heidegger was a fascist, really was a fascist, in terms of his career and politics and so on. And then very often people say, but his discussion of being or so has nothing to do with that. It has a lot to do with it, because as he emphasizes being, he reinforces the beings, what is the case in a civil society and in the state. And therefore, he has an alliance with the positivists, and like the positivists, he wants the capitalistic system in its fascist form even to exist forever. Hitler's 1,000-year realm or whatever was really forever. So you have an abstract concept in the logic or in metaphysics like being And when you then say, we exclude forever nothing, then you exclude also becoming, you exclude chronos, you exclude the transitionary character of your own state and all your institutions and so on. So on the other side, we have the Gautama Buddha, Gautama the enlightened one. Now here's the other thing. Nothing is, and being is not. And you see the same result from the other side. He also excludes becoming. He was a prince, he was an upper class guy. So Muhammad was a middle class guy. Jesus was a low class guy. That is not something, which just is not to be interesting or whatever. And you see, the Hebrew Bible was written by middle class people, but the New Testament was written by low class people. Jesus was a poor guy who was murdered by the rich, of course, because he provoked them all the time. No rich man can enter the kingdom of God, and so on and so on. That's why he was killed. By the way, contemporary issue on Martin Luther King Day we had, and the son of Martin Luther King came and said something unbelievably interesting, and they repressed it right away. When this sentence came, they stopped him. And he said, "My father was murdered because of the distribution of wealth." Because of distribution of wealth. That had never been said. And I put it right away, online course and everywhere and so on. So that people can look at CNN, they can take it again. But it ended with that. My father was murdered for the distribution of wealth. Now, what happened? He was, as you know, a garbage collector strike, which was white garbage collectors and black collectors. And at the same time, he included the workers of Vietnam. So that means he broadened the whole thing, included black and white workers and national workers and international workers, and demanded the distribution of wealth. That's why they murdered him. That's what broke the camel's back. Okay, so we see when we look at Hegel's logic, which all the critical theorists use, also Fromm and so on, and Habermas and so on, it's a logic of becoming, and it starts with this tremendous opposition. Being is, nothing is not, becoming is not. Nothing is, being is not, therefore becoming is not. Now, for instance, when you see that Christianity has a metaphysics of becoming, but it was taken over by Greek church fathers and so on, who were following Parmenides and Plato and so on, and suddenly out of a dynamic religion of becoming becomes then a religion of being, because the clergy has the same interests like the kings have and so on, that this church will never disappear because they will never have it so good. Jesus came to announce the kingdom, which is where the whole movement goes to, and what came was the church, a static type of a community. Okay, so therefore we have a few sentences here. Panta re in Greek then means everything moves constantly. That is elaborated again. No man ever steps in the river twice. Now today we are these people. The next time when we meet, we will be different. If we had had our seminar last year, it would have been very different from it is this year. And if we would have it next year, it would be very different again. So one cannot step in the same way twice, because the river, the objective thing, has moved, and at the same time we ourselves have become different. So you can see that if somebody wants to go back, for instance, to form a love affair, you had a beautiful love affair in a summer camp or whatever 50 years ago, and then you would say, do I want to have this lover again? You would be horribly disappointed, because not only outside the situation has changed, she has changed too. She will be unrecognizable. So this is and then we have a third sentence, and that sentence is very dangerous. Namely, polemos, pater, panton. When we say polemics, right, there's the word polemos, war. So war is the father of all things. War is the father of things, and that is, of course, but we know of war now. But sometimes people do this argument and say, if the First World War had not taken place, we would not have penicillin or something. And they bring little examples, or We would not have my uncle Albin Kehl. He invented the wings which go backwards for the German Air Force, and then the Allies came and stole it, and now most airplanes don't have this straight wing, but it goes backward. And my uncle started as a little boy looking at the doves. He had a whole house full of doves which flew in and out, and they have these backward wings. In the meantime, we even have airplanes which have only wings. The camouflage, the body inside is very small; it's not even visible. So that they would not be there without the war. I think our civil air fleets or so would not on this level. I came to Frankfurt recently. They built a new hall there, and for an airplane which has 3 stories, it has 900 people in there. 900 people. They just built it in France, and last year it landed already in Frankfurt and so on. So they would not have all these machines with already in the Air Force, the British Air Force in the First World War would not have been built in that way. So, but we are so tired of this, and we also see the horrible side. What with these technical advances, the artillery from the First World War, the Second one, and the battles on the Somme, the river in France, where people were just butchered by these artillery pieces and so on. So if you think of the Civil War to the First World War, and think of even the Northern artillery, or the artillery of Napoleon 60 years earlier or so, you see there is progress, and the war brings that progress and so on. But some of that progress is just horrifying. So, when we want to define war, it's very difficult because there are thousands of different forms. There is a war of thievery, war of retaliation. Hitler's war against Russia was a war of thievery. This little place where they have the Olympics is not too far away from Stalingrad or Volgograd now. So there are these the aggressive wars or defensive wars, and these defensive wars turn right away very often into aggressive wars, and so on. There are civil wars, inside of the country, and if you have external wars, you sometimes can avoid the internal wars, and so on and so on. So, and then, but of course, we would be interested: is there a war? Is there a struggling, with where one does not have to use force? So a non-violent type of struggling, and that we had just on Monday. We celebrated this Martin Luther King. He was here in 1963, and he talked here about this idea of liberation. That is, of course, what the struggle is all about: liberation of the working class, of all races, and so on. That he got from his Hegel teacher. He had a Hegelian teacher in Boston College who taught him that, but he could not teach him the methodology. Hegel also only knew real wars like Napoleon in his time fought, and Hannibal and Caesar and so on. These were all violent things. He also knew only Spartacus and really violent revolution, like the French Revolution, which took place when he was born and a little bit later and so on. So, then also he was a Lutheran, and therefore Christianity in all its paradigms, except the first one. The first one paradigm didn't even take soldiers into the community. Soldiers could not become Christians and so on. So, but then with the 7-point just war theory and the alliance between Christianity and the state, which had murdered their founder and so on, then things changed, and the idea came out that some wars could be just, and therefore soldiers could also be Christians, and that got bigger and bigger and so on. So, but what Martin Luther King had to go into a completely different civilization and religion, namely to India, to the Hindu Mahatma Gandhi. So he combined the freedom idea which he got from Hegel with the methodology of nonviolence. And that was the greatness of him, because that was completely foreign for this in the West. Nobody ever heard about this. or practiced it or whatever. And it had to be misunderstood right away as weakness, and he confused a lot in the South, the police and so on, because they were not used to it. And but that was very brave and unbelievable, and he stuck to it. He was beaten up and so on. So with Mahatma Gandhi, he knew, of course, the story. Mahatma Gandhi had he let his people march to the British post, and the British beat them up on their heads, and they were bloody, and they went back, and their wives came and bandaged them up, and then bandaged up they would go back again, would be beaten up again, and that went on the whole day long. And the British had been already annihilated and thousands of people before, so there was this type of violent war, colonial war and so on, but Mahatma Gandhi fought that through, and then he was assassinated himself. He was assassinated by a Hindu because he was too lax in terms of the Muslims, and that shows us, that all these liberal leaders and non-violent leaders are somehow have it harder than the right-wingers or again the dictators. So, Stalin was not assassin, and Hitler was not assassin. Hitler has 42 assassination attempts, but nothing worked and so on. But when you look here in this country, you have the liberal guy, Lincoln, who did not really liberate the slaves. He rescued the Union, and by annihilating the southern ruling class through the northern ruling class, and then, of course, the result was that the blacks were become free, and so on, 50 years later or whatever. So, but when you think of McKinley, was assassinated, and then, of course, Kennedy and his brother who ran for office, he was assassinated, and the struggle is interesting between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Malcolm X converted from Christianity to Islam because of the fourth commandment of the Sermon on the Mount. Not eye for eye, tooth for tooth, but holding up the other cheek. And Malcolm X thought that was not the right method when you face white police and their dogs and so on. And so he was for a violent method, and he was very aggressive. Not aggressive enough for many people, the black Muslims. He was not brutal enough, but then he had a conversion. He went to the Near East. He made a pilgrimage to Mecca, right? He did, and therefore changed there. And he said if he would become a martyr, he wanted to be martyrized for brotherhood, and that was the only way for the United States to become sane. And so somehow renounced the violent method but he had no time anymore because he was martyrized and by his own group, maybe in cooperation with the CIA. Okay, so that as far as the we can talk about this a little bit later, but as far as the introduction here is concerned, then we have something from one of the critical theorists. Now, Bloch did never work really in the Institute Ernst Bloch there. Ernst Bloch tried to get money from Horkheimer in order to flee from Czechoslovakia to the United States, and Horkheimer was willing to give it to him, but then his publisher gave it to him. So there were some connections, and he also is in the background of Erich Fromm. He visited the family. The Fromm family was very kosher, very strict, and so on, and Bloch was a little bit more relaxed on the whole thing, but he influenced Bloch very much, and also Horkheimer, and also Adorno, and his background is not so much Hegel, but Schelling is a great idealist whom he follows. So, but now what he has to say there, he's of course Jewish too, like Bloch and so on. And so he, when he was in the United States, he worked here as a caretaker in a high school. His third wife was an architect, and she got a job here, so she fed him, and he added a little bit through doing that. So for 12 years or whatever, he worked in a high school. He could not find any teaching position, which was during this time, he wrote his big book, then 3 volumes about different religions and the idea of the future and utopia and so on. And that was published only 30 years later in the United States, but it was published right away in Europe when he came back. So what does he have to say? To think is to step over, to overstep, or to transcend. So we separate ourselves from the chimpanzees about 2 million years ago, let's see, in Africa. Slowly we developed further and evolved with our hands and hands-free, and we don't have to go through this. But about 200,000 years ago, we became conscious of ourselves. So self-consciousness was developed, or you could say thinking was developed. Of course, my sparrows, I'm not only a girl watcher, I'm also a bird watcher there. And so they can, of course, think a little bit, right? So, but they see only particular things. So the seeds which I give them, they see them. And then when another bird comes and wants to steal it from them, then they see this one too and fight against it. But it's all particulars. So thinking means universals. That means they do not know that they are species of miserable Michigan sparrows or whatever, or blue jays or whatever, and they don't know that we are that species who may feed them or not. So that means something happened in us that we could see not only that we could see the universal. That means we could not only see the trees, we could see the forest. Now a lot of people still cannot see the forest. So there is an evolution going on. Not everybody is on the same level in terms of thinking or whatever. So some people still have, like the birds, they have self-feeling, and they can get sad and get happy or whatever. But that's not thinking yet. Also, statistics or whatever is not thinking yet. So thinking has something to do with universals, that you can transcend the particular. That means you can also transcend your particular environment. The animals are locked up in their environments. The environment may consist of certain factors like food, like the sparrows, or enemies who want to eat the food, and then sex partners, the genus process, so and wherever they meet something like that, food, sex partner, enemy, or so, then they see something. That is their world. And they cannot transcend this world because there is no universality in them. So, but this is our ability, that we can break out of our environment, but only insofar as we really transcend. And so what we found out psychoanalytically and so in terms of Fromm and so on, is this phenomenon of ego weakness. Ego weakness means when people do not transcend anymore because of secularization, then they become somewhat prisoners of their environment again. That means they cannot separate themselves from the stimulus which comes in through the eyes, or a sex stimulus or nice car stimulus or whatever. They are caught up in these stimuli and cannot choose between them neither. They become hooked and conditioned and so on. The same way impulses which come from the id inside, they are overwhelmed by this or that impulse to eat, and they eat all the time, or the porno impulse, and they look at the time all the time, and they cannot free themselves anymore. That means the ego cannot abstract from it and transcend it toward. Now, religious people transcend to Yahweh, they transcend to Allah, they transcend to whatever God it may be, or whatever image or name the God may have. Some religions have no image, no God, no name. Others have hundreds of names and so on. So, but that is considered by Habermas and so on as a reified transcendence. So, in reality, one can aim at a non-reified transcendence. That means one sees the deficiency of all the names of God, Elohim or Shaddai or Yahweh or whatever. They are they're hitting at something, but they are insufficient and therefore have to be transcended. That is the second and the third commandment, the inhibition against making images and naming the absolute and so on. It is only an attempt not to stop the transcending, so that one doesn't stand still with one or the other image of the absolute, but that one knows it is relative and goes beyond it. If it is not relativized, then one becomes easily fanatic. One cannot see anything else anymore. Like when we say fans, you're the sports fans. Fan is a short form of fanatic. They are fanatics. They see only this one group, their party, and then they shout and kill other people when they lose or whatever. So this is what is meant here. To think is to step over, to overstep, and somewhere, we could say maybe 200,000 years ago, we began to overstep and to go out, and at the same time remaining with ourselves and becoming aware of ourselves as this individual, as a member of a group or family, and so on. Before, there were no names of nations, no names of persons, nothing at all. So it was a very slow process, but that is something characteristic of us. The best thing about religion, Bloch says, is that it makes for heretics. A heretic is a very smart person. A heretic is somebody who becomes discontent with a particular relative image or name or notion of the absolute, and therefore he presupposes or offers another one. And so the group where he comes from thinks he is a heretic. So the Buddha, the Gautama, is a heretic. Many saints of Catholicism were under suspicion of heresy. Augustine was under suspicion, and Thomas Aquinas was under suspicion. Then finally they all become integrated again, and so on, sometimes not. So that is the rather provocative definition, that the best thing about religion is that it makes for heretics, or religion is religio, so it's a Latin word. Ligio means to bind. Ligare means to pay, litigation, and so on. And the re is a backward prefix. So you are bound back to the beginning, to the mythical creator God who created the world in 7 days or whatever. Most religions have a myth of origin. They are mythical in that sense, and that rightly we can call religio, because all these people are bound back to Alpha, to the first, to the beginning where everything comes from. Also they themselves and the state and the family and the agriculture and the instruments, everything comes from that beginning. The God gave it to people. But now there is an alternative here to it. Religion is religio, binding back. So we can, whoever binds back, we can call religion. But then it binds its adherents back first and foremost to a mythical God of the beginning, a creator God, and so on. Now, so widely understood, adherence to the Exodus figure called I will be who I will be, and to the Christianity of the Son of Man and of the eschaton is no longer religion. We could say, could correct him, could say it is pro-religion. So RE means backward, PRO means forward. It does not bind people backward anymore, but it binds people forward toward Omega. It becomes eschatological. Now, Judaism has this eschatology, and then Islam has it, and Christianity has it. And so Bloch would not call them religion anymore, because they do not bind people backward, but they bind them forward now. And so when does that happen? It happens in the Exodus figure. I mean, Exodus is, of course, the Hebrews' liberation from the slaveholders in Egypt. Moses did this. So there we are not concerned with the Creator God anymore, but with the Redeemer God, who redeems, who liberates people forward to the land where honey and so on flows, the first utopia, to the chosen people go to the chosen land, which Yahweh gives them, and which now has all these political problems now, because many rabbis, in Israel say that is the land which was given. That was the utopia, and they have made a lot of good things out of this land there, in terms of irrigation and so on. So, but that would be, of course, this land then becomes the end again, then it arrests the dialectics, it arrests the transcendence, and it becomes mythological. Mythological nationalism, Zionism. So, rightly understood, adherence to the Exodus figure. Now, the Exodus figure, there is a name for God, or image of God, and it is usually translated Yahweh as I am who I am. What Bloch translates in the future tense, so that can be done. And then is I shall be who I shall be, then it points forward to Omega in terms of the different eschatological ideas in the three Abrahamic religions. And then that's for Judaism, and in Christianity it's the Son of Man. The Son of Man is from Daniel, from the prophet Daniel, and that is how it's used. I talked with the rabbi recently. By the way, you are invited on Thursday, week from Thursday. I go to the rabbi with the other class. If anybody's interested, since the Frankfurt School is so Jewish, you can come along. You're invited. We go to the Stadium Drive on the left side there, and so close to the campus is the Congregation of Moses, and we have nice talks with the rabbi. And I talked with the rabbi about the Son of Man, and he said, well, they just said, that Jesus was a man out of flesh and blood. But that was not meant with the Son of Man. That was a title. That means the friends of Jesus were very impressed by him, and they used names and images which they found in their culture and applied it to them. It is possible even that this is the only title which Jesus of Nazareth applied to himself. He probably never said that he was the Son of God, but he said that he was the Son of Man. And the Son of Man was to come on the clouds in the end, on Judgment Day. And so, therefore, he was asked in the Sanhedrin on the day before his death about this, and it seems to have agreed to it that he was the Son of Man. So, it could also be that he believed that this Son of Man would come, and he was not him, but somebody else would come. Like today, in Islam, it's the Jesus Messiah who will come after Ali in Iran. The big turmoil first, and then the Jesus Messiah will come. Of course, for the Jews, there is no Jesus Messiah. The Jesus Messiah was a false alarm, like so many false alarms, like Siebert and so on. And the fellow who led the last attacks against the Romans, and the whole group was annihilated in 134, Bar Kokhba. Bar Kokhba was the Messiah, but when Messiahs died, then they showed that they were not the Messiahs. Siebert converted to Islam and thereby showed that he was not the Messiah. And these are all false alarms, and so for the Jews, Jesus is a false alarm, and they have suffered tremendously for 2,000 years because of saying this, because that is behind the pogroms in Poland, in Germany, and Spain, and everywhere where Jewish people were persecuted in their settlements, which were closed up from other people, and so on. So nevertheless, we have in Christianity, and we have in Judaism, we have that turn from religion to pro-religion, or Bloch would say to no religion at all, but humanism in a certain sense. So, and of the eschaton, there is eschata, means the God Yahweh, who becomes one with his people. They become his people, he becomes their God. That is the eschaton, that is the singular. And then there are the eschata. The eschata means there will be no suffering anymore. The tears will be wiped off of people. There will be no death anymore. There will be no porno anymore. There will be no stealing or murdering or lying, or what happens with us, and all the corruption which we have from day to day in Virginia now and tomorrow somewhere else, and so on and so on. So that is these eschata, and they are connected with the eschaton, plural, singular and plural. Only an atheist can be a good Christian. That is amazing now. And only a Christian can be a good atheist. What does something like that mean? What is an atheist? An atheist is one who knows that all these names, which in all the world religions which you see on the B on your roadmap, that all this whole world of images and names and so on, that this is all relative. And therefore he has a tremendous function, the atheist, for religious people, namely to free them from insufficient and defective images and names and so on. So that means only the guy who frees himself from these mythological images of religion can be a good Christian, or you could also say a good Jew or a good Islamic person, because he has freed himself and he is now pro-religious. He is bound forward toward that no-name, nameless, imageless, totally demythologized type of absolute. Okay, so then what is decisive is to transcend without transcendence. To transcend without transcendence means to transcend toward a non-reified transcendence. Every name, of course, an image reifies. So that made Habermas in Tübingen, or wherever he taught, Frankfurt, made him wild when somebody came with the name of the absolute. Haven't I told you, didn't we talk about the second and the third commandment and so on? So that when the little pious person came and talked about the Heavenly Father or what, made him wild, because these are all reifications of the absolute. Okay, now then there is something here from which he quoted, also Bloch quote, but it was from Augustine, Dies Septimus non nos ipsi erimus. That means we will be the seventh day, we will be the Sabbath. That means in this transcendence without reification, man plays a role. The historical process goes there. And you see that, for instance, teaching of Jesus, where somebody on Sabbath, something falls into the fountain there, the ox or whatever, and then people are not supposed to work on Sabbath. But this little living thing is more important than the Sabbath. And particularly when a person gets sick, he can be healed on Sabbath because man is more important than the law is, and so on. So here breaks through the humanism, and Bloch and Habermas and all these people are interested in the mobilization of the humanistic potential in religions. Now, when you listen to many Protestants here, they think that humanism is something bad. Humanism is Skinner, or humanism is Marx, or whatever. But Christianity always had a humanistic element in itself. And so we have humanism in Augustine, in Thomas Aquinas, in Luther, even in Calvin, and so on. So that has something which has happened here and which is very bad. Namely, instead of mobilizing the humanistic potential of these religions, they have repressed it instead of that. So therefore, they don't see the connection anymore between their religion and denying health insurance, or denying food stamps, or denying soup kitchens, or denying, as they did in the last weeks, denying unemployment compensation, and so on and so on. So, or that they live with a good conscience besides the slums on the other side of the railroad station, and the slums in Flint, and the slums in Grand Rapids, and the slums in Chicago, and the slums in Detroit, and everywhere, and they feel nothing. They feel absolutely nothing. This is horrifying. So that is bad religion then. It is religion which makes people feel good. I saw a horrible movie last night. It just came up, the old movie about these renewal tent events which Protestant groups have, and a little saintly woman in there, but the whole struggle about this revival, they were the enlightened journalists, and they, of course, saw the whole mess and so on, but suddenly they saw there was also something genuine in it. In all this untruth, there was also an element of truth in it, which they didn't want to oppose really, and that was an horrible mess. So the American religious situation is the most messed up situation which was ever, not even in the late Roman Empire with all its variation of religions, came to that extent. So, and it's very difficult for people to get out, find their way out of it. And one has to be very careful not to hurt whatever may be genuine in this. It may be genuine, it comes in a very childlike form, and so to clarify that without hurting people unnecessarily is an unbelievable job to be done here. Okay, so by the way, even the newest wave of atheism, they were very aggressive first, and then suddenly they said, well, there are some nuns who work in the hospital, one cannot say that this is a bad thing. And the Nazis did the same thing on the Eastern Front when they had nuns who were in the hospitals, and you could depend on the nuns. When the nun nurses went dating and forgot about all the people there in the hospital, those nuns were always there. They were totally devoted to this and so on. So, nevertheless, this is there is a humanistic goal in religion, and that is expressed here in this Dia Septimus, the seventh day, as we ourselves. So, according to the Bible, the seventh day is when God rests, and Augustine then, in a heretical statement somehow, made the seventh day. That's really us. That when that we are the goal of the historical process. During times, and that's George Orwell here. During times of universal deceit, telling the truth becomes a revolutionary act. So we have to ask in our discourse, what that means with this revolution. And in my discussion with the rabbi, in my class discussion with the rabbi, he said once, I think it was a class on religion and revolution, which is the only class with that title in the United States and Canada. And they always are amazed that I got this course through, and I got it through for 50 years already. And they always, all these committees somehow let it go through again, which is amazing. Particularly in Canada, they say, "Well, did you really get that through?" I did all the time. So, but then we went there to the rabbi and said, this Judaism is revolutionary, and he said, well, if we would insist, the Decalogue, the Ten Commandments, that would be revolution, because the Ten Commandments are violated from the morning to the night in civil society, and to insist on that would really be a revolutionary act. That is the same thing what George Orwell and Huxley and so on, they also have in mind. So the question is always, are we really such horrible liars? Then did other people not lie too? To be sure, the other people lied too. If we really lie more than others, is quite questionable. And what is meant with lying here? It is not, just saying something untrue or so, not under oath or whatever. I think lying means more the universal deceit. The Gershom Sholem, or Gerhard Sholem, who was close with Walter Benjamin and had also a great influence, a Kabbalist, a Jewish Kabbalist from Berlin, and he would say simple things that we have come in a time where the God can appear only as nothingness. We are waiting for the one who is struck by this nothingness, and the turn can come about, and so on. Or he would say, now when the deceit has come to its peak or so, and he said that in the 20s or so. So there is something unusual. Civil society has developed that deceit, and we could translate it in terms of necessary appearance. Deceit as necessary appearance. That means our Ankermen and so on have to portray an appearance of normalcy all the time, because the breaking in of non-everyday life world events or theodicy events. New soldier killed again, and it happens almost every day in Afghanistan and so on. The flags go down and so on. So how do you deal with this? Or a setback, internationally a setback or so, how do you deal with this? And sometimes we say, well, we had that before, and now we deal with it. Or when you think about the nature out there, obviously something unusual is happening. So they say, no, as long as we can see and have statistics, we had that before in 1890 or whatever. So that means normalcy. The deceit takes place in order to give people the feeling that things are normal. You see, I grew up in Nazi Germany, and we had the movie There were all these concentration camps, hundreds of them, and there were all these battles, and the Jews were massacred and so on. But the sun was always shining, and there was always the announcer of the German radio stations, and he had the same pleasant voice all the time, no matter what he said. Even when he then had to announce all the lost battles, in the East and so on, these were all front corrections. So he invented all kinds of words, instead of saying I've lost the Sixth Army, which was the worst thing which had ever happened to any general in all the world history of 6,000 years, we know, where you lose a whole army with 1 million men and so on. Well, that was a front correction, We had to take the front back a little bit. So this type of deceit, so we have to see it's more complicated than little lies, where you're there, where you're not there, or whatever. It is systematic, it is systematized. It is the normal. That means the abnormal is really portrayed as the normal. We hit at somebody, the Virginia guy now has the corruption again. He took money from a businessman and so on. That means there is this civil society overwhelming the state, and they pay these politicians, and then the politicians make propaganda for them and advertise them and so on. And this is it's a catastrophe, or that the offices have to be bought with money. Aristotle already said that is the end of democracy, as soon as you have to pay for offices and so on. It's a disaster that we have no Labor Party. It's a disaster. But the deceit makes people feel that we don't need a Labor Party, or that the left wing of the Democratic Party does the thing, they give a little milk powder or something like that. All this is disastrous. But the disaster is presented as our normalcy. That is the deceit. Okay, so then at bottom, every man knows perfectly well that he is a unique being, only once on this earth, and by no extraordinary chance will such a marvelously picturesque piece of diversity in unity as he is ever be put together a second time, which is Friedrich Nietzsche. And he plays an important role, not so much for Fromm, I would say, but for Adorno and Horkheimer and so on. And Dustin has written about him too. One of his theses is there in his examen there. So he's the last great bourgeois enlightener, Nietzsche, the son of a minister, Protestant minister. When Protestantism did away with celibacy, you had then married, not priesthood, because he canceled the sacrament of priesthood too, but you had ministers now, and these ministers were married, and these married ministers play an important, their families play an unbelievable role in the culture, in the German culture of idealism and so on. Hegel was supposed to become a minister, and others were ministers and so on. So that they were ministerial families is a tremendous culture factor which Catholicism is missing. So, nevertheless, this is a beautiful word there, but we have to understand it, of course, in the context of his whole work. There is this great work, and so spoke Zarathustra, which was written in Sils Marie. I went there once, and it was a beautiful, tiny little village on the Alps toward Italy, and surrounded by huge mountains. And I went to the house of Nietzsche. It's still there, where he lived there. He was there for 8 years. He went there and wrote. It took him 8 years to write Thus Spoke Zarathustra, a very prophetic type of a book, in which he really aimed at a transvaluation of all values. That means the Christian values of holding up the other cheek, or being humble, and so on, were replaced by the value of vitality, strength, and power, and so on. It did become part of fascism, and the fascists made use of Nietzsche, particularly through his sister. He became insane in Basel, and then moved in with his sister in Berlin, and he was living under the roof there in her house, and she took care of him. And Hitler and the sister made contact with the fascist party and with Hitler. And so Hitler did quote him that we have the strong iron of Kruppstahl, steel from Krupp, and so on. And many of these things were inspired by Nietzsche. But the question is if they really interpreted him right. So there is a French type of a Nietzsche who influenced Sartre and so on. There is a Heideggerian type of a Nietzsche. And so one has to be very careful and to get to that real Nietzsche. So Marcuse and also Adorno learned a lot from Nietzsche, and they both went to Salisbury and they had their vacations there, and they still met an old man who carried the suitcases of Nietzsche from the railroad station to the house there. The house was near a church, and when the church bells were ringing, it must have ruined the nervous system of Nietzsche, which was very sensitive anyway. So, but the porter there, the carrier, what he said was that little boys of the village came and they put little pebbles into his red umbrella. It was not against the rain, but against the sun. So when he marched behind his house, he could climb up on the mountain, and he protected himself with the umbrella. So when he opened it up, all the little pebbles fell on his head. So then Adorno commented, he said, well, maybe Nietzsche had second thoughts about the value of vitality or so after this experience, and maybe he did, maybe he didn't. So now we also have to see when he in Basel, his way became insane, and in this process he once saw a driver beating a horse going up the hill, and he ran over the street and he embraced the horse and kissed the horse and wept and so on. And so vitality and this strongness and toughness and whatever, it had another side to it. The last letter which he wrote to the great historian Burckhardt in Basel, he signed, "Endure Jesus the Christ." That is amazing, because Nietzsche is maybe the only one who did not attack Christianity as Marx did. Marx attacked Christianity because it betrayed itself, because the bourgeoisie here who appeals to Jesus at the same time makes him a liar with every word they say and every deed they do. But Nietzsche attacked Jesus himself. He thought that his teaching were slave morality, the rebelliousness of slaves. And so he would have subscribed to the Sermon on the Mount if it would have come out of the position of strength and so on. But he thought that it was spoken out of the perspective of slaves, and so that is what he despised. And those who remained fascists after Hitler died, there's the one who reported on the Olympics. So we have this Olympics in Russia. There was an Olympics in 1934 in Berlin, and who was the woman who maybe you know this? Riefenstahl, yeah, Riefenstahl. Riefenstahl was unbelievably enthusiastic about Hitler. Hitler had a lot of women around him who admired him for his greatness and his strength and so on, and she was one of them. She was an actress too. She made movies, homeland movies in the Alps and so on, a little bit kitschy, but nevertheless they all had this idea of strength. She then married a German officer who I think fell in the war, and but later on she had to suffer a lot because nobody hired her anymore for any movies, or there were tremendous retaliation because she cooperated with it, and she made these heroic movies there about the Olympics. She was fascinated by these athletes and so on. That's fascism. It is, not to see the sick and the old and the children or whatever, but these warrior types and whatever. So when she was 80 years old, she was still diving down and taking pictures of sharks, because the shark survived, the impact of the asteroid here in the Caribbean, and they just go through the water, open their mouth, and eat everything what comes their little whatever, maybe in the water, some lakes or whatever. They enjoy everything. So it's a huge killer machine, and that she was fascinated. And she went also to Africa and went to tribes there, and she took pictures only of the warriors and their beautiful wives and so on, but nothing of the old people, nothing of the sick there, nothing of death, whatever. So this is the fascist impulse. The man as a beautiful blonde, blue-eyed animal who realizes these powers of vitality in him and represents that and personifies it. So and we have that. They produce also a certain art, a certain style of architecture and so on. Art, you see huge men with big muscles and beautiful women standing together with them and so on, all totally healthy, and so on. That is the idea, of fascist idea of a man. So the SS, of course, they all were formed and shaped in these terms, and the great disappointment, of course, of Hitler when all these white old guys, they lost one battle after the other against the Russians. And tough thing. Then in the bunker there was one SS officer left with 100,000 men, and he was supposed to liberate him, and he said he could not fight against the 1 million Russian army, and so that was when Hitler really lost it, and shouted and screamed and told all his generals that they are cowards, and that now nothing is left to me than to kill myself. That is all what you have left me with. So, and that National Socialism had gone under, and that fate wanted it that way. So he kept that fascist guard to the end. The fascist guard, the fascist image of the absolute is that he punishes the weak, and he somehow rewards the strong. So the Soviet soldiers had shown themselves as being strong, so he is on their side. Same thing happened in 1917, 18. The Germans had shown themselves weak. The guard punishes the weak, and he elevates the strong, the powerful people of vitality. So therefore, see that fascism is a very serious thing, and there's more of it in people than this meets the eye. Okay, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. Alan Kay, well, that is a very optimistic type of a thing, and we have a lot of people who talk about construction. It comes from Kant. We construct reality and so on. So I always say, then there comes always in Freudian terms the reality check, when your construction doesn't work really. If your construction works or not, you see when the reality hits. If you say, the gravity, law of gravity does not count, then just go to a roof and jump down and try it out. That's a reality check, Or if you have some ideas what life should be like and you become a complete loser in the end, you know that your constructs were not worth a dime. So if the constructs are adequate or not to the rationality of which is in things themselves, that shows when things go wrong. Then. Okay, so unicumque homo est ibi beneficio locus est. Wherever there is a human being, there is an opportunity for a kindness. That is from Seneca. Seneca was the teacher of Nero. He was a Stoic, and we have Stoics today. The guy whom I just mentioned there, the psychoanalyst here from Erich, he is a Stoic. What is a Stoic? After, like it is with us, our great philosophical system has broken down, the state mythology has collapsed, and so in the Roman Empire then you had the Epicureans and you had the Stoics and so on, and they became subjective. They didn't care about the state or whatever anymore. They withdrew into their private life, as many of us do, their own sports and their own television and their own backyard and their own birds and so on. and think, the state is corrupt and you cannot do anything about it. So the Stoic is a pantheist, so he says, God and nature is the same thing. So he defines the absolute as nature. And he himself wants to do something good in spite of the fact that he knows that society and the state cannot be rescued. So therefore they concentrated on educating future emperors. So and they thought if you have a good emperor, then maybe one can pull things out of their mess and so on. If it went wrong, like it did with Nero, then you could sit in the bathtub and open up your veins and could commit suicide. It was permitted. Suicide was allowed in that case, at least, and many of them did this. So we have in Congress, we always have some Stoics or so who know that the whole thing is disastrous, but they say we want to do the best we can and to go to the extreme in doing that. So that is a good statement there. And then the grand essentials to happiness in this life are something to do, something to love, and something to hope for. That is from Addison, and there is only one mighty lever of civilization, that is religion. That is from Bachhofen, and Fromm quoted that there and agrees with it. Every rise and every decline of human existence springs from a movement that originates in this supreme sphere, religion. So Bachhofen was a Jew who invented the mother-right theory. He studied the law, Roman law, which was unbelievably rigorous in terms of the family, the patriarchal family, and he deducted dialectically from that it was so rigorous and so extreme because it had to overcome something else, namely the mother right. So he assumed that there were first mother right cultures which were overthrown by patriarchal societies, and he would find that not only in Roman law but also in Greek or Mesopotamian mythology. Think of the Genesis, the Babylonian Genesis, where the god Marduk has to, in order to overcome the mother earth, the earth mother, he has to somehow to catch her and to kill her in order to then to make the male domination possible. But he has to do something else too. He has to, by his mind and by his word, he has to put together some cloth, take it apart, and put it together again. That means the power of the woman is in the womb. She gives birth. He can give birth. Man cannot do this. But man's power is in the word, in the logos, in the brain. So after Marduk has proven that by his word, by the power of the word, he can put the clothes apart and together, then he is ready now to take his spear and to kill the earth mother. That is the mythological reflection of what is going on in society. So that is the theory behind it. So we have the same thing in Agamemnon. Lives already in the patriarchal system. When he doesn't get wind for his fleet to go to Troy, he sacrifices his daughter. In a matriarchal system, that would never have been possible. So he sacrificed the daughter, Iphigenia, and then he gets wind and he goes to Troia. And in Troy, he is 10 years there and cannot overcome them with traditional warfare. Until then, the first bourgeois appears, Odysseus, the tricky one, tricky dick guy. And he does whatever businessman does now, since from Odysseus to Bush, there is a long tradition of civil society and the bourgeois character, which is the center of it. So he studies the attitudes of the Trojan. He finds out that they are very curious, and therefore invents now something, an advertisement thing, a horse, an empty horse, and he puts Greek soldiers into it, puts the horse into the moonshine. He knows they cannot restrain themselves. like the businessman holds up the commodity there, this Lincoln, this car, this house, and so on. He knows he will jump, with absolute necessity. And so they do. They come out at night and they take the horse into it, and the men come out of the horse, open the doors, and the Greek army marches in, and they win the war. So Odysseus goes on, and you can see in all the bush today, all the bourgeois corporate ruling class here, they all have the same characteristics. For instance, toward religion, he eats up the cows of Poseidon. These cows are holy. For the bourgeois, there's nothing is holy, particularly when he is hungry. Nothing is holy. So he eats up the cows, and Poseidon, the master of the Mediterranean, gets very upset and then throws him into the middle of the ocean. They had no compass. They had to navigate along the coast, and the wind took him out into the ocean. And so that he was punished by the gods. So Odysseus, which means, by the way, the nobody, who and so on, uk is no in Greek. So the nobody, the bourgeois, the first middle class guy, he is now sitting out there. He is on one side aggressive, he's sadistic, but he's also masochistic. He's willing to take a lot. He hits downward toward the weak, and he then takes also, when he finds a more powerful one, like Poseidon, he also takes the suffering. So Odysseus was called the much suffering Odysseus. You can read that all in Homer there, I have him standing over there. And then he comes to a cave, an island. He lands somewhere, and there's a cyclope there with only one eye, so he's not evolved. He's a man, but he's a primitive type of a man. He doesn't even have two eyes, but only one. And so, a huge guy, a giant, and so now the tricky dick has to find a way. There he goes into the cave, doesn't know what it is really, eats the stuff of him, and there comes the giant. He comes in, closes the door with a big rock, and then begins to eat Odysseus' people for breakfast. Now this guy is so damn it primitive. Think of an American businessman who has to sell his damn it stuff there. People may need it or may not need it. If they don't need it, he must make them need it. These are the artificial needs which he has to produce. So that's what he has to do now, Odysseus. The guy has no needs where you can really hook him. He has it all there, what he needs. He almost needs nothing. So then he sees some grapes in the corner, and he tramples with his friends there, and they make wine out of the grapes. That's a new commodity now. The guy has never had wine. He doesn't know the effects, and so on. Now he starts to drink, and of course he's drunk. And lays there, snores, and so on. Now comes Odysseus, the sadism of the bourgeois, and he takes a stick and puts it into the one eye he has, and has a tremendous joy how this eye is jumping out of his head. And so now the guy doesn't know what to do. He doesn't see anything anymore. And Odysseus then, and that's another trick, he puts all his comrades under the sheep, and they go out, and the giant can only touch them on the top, and so they all are carried out by the sheep, and he takes the big male sheep there, and he hangs under it, and he also touches again the giant, and cannot see anybody. And so they all, escape again, like they escaped Troy. And then it goes on, the sadism goes on. There's no limit to the sadistic type of the guy. When you think of waterboarding in the CIA, there's this sadism in it. People who have no weapons are basically laying there, and you make them drown or what. That is sadism. It's unnecessary, really. If you were intelligent enough, you could get the information, but you play stupid and torture people and so on. So I mention that very often. I was never tortured in American prison camps, because the Jews who did the research, they were smart enough to get information out of people without torturing them. But there's this component there, or to urinate on fallen Taliban or so. These are all these extra things. So Fort Benning, where we produce our terrorists, they go into the villages there, and before they shoot them, they rape them first. My students, the two nuns, were killed there among 4 months by the people in El Salvador, so, but they had to rape them first, they had to steal from them first before they shot them, and so on. So it's this extra component which the bourgeois personality, which Fromm calls the authoritarian personality, or the marketing character, or the having character. That is the whole evolution of Fromm's idea there. That is the bourgeois. So, so therefore, he goes out of the cave, and then he shouts, in certain directions there are mountains, and he knows they echo, so the guy cannot see anything anymore. So he throws all the stones in the wrong direction, and he sails away with his ship there. And then he comes to an island where so you see how the bourgeois behaves. The colonial people, the primitives, the British have to bring them culture in India and so on. That is the whole attitude, and the attitude toward women too. He comes to an island where it's governed by Circe, and Circe is a matriarch, and she transformed all men into pigs. So she has an whole island full of pigs there, and so now again, Odysseus finds her weak points and gets to her, and she falls in love with him, and she transforms all the pigs into men again, and she even gives him a ship so that he can go back to Ithaca, to his estate which he had left 10 years earlier or longer. And there again comes the bourgeois, and he sneaks in, he disguises himself. The bourgeois does not march around here like the feudal lords. He says, this is my castle, and here's my horse, and there's my flag, or like the slaveholder. He sneaks around, he is invisible. The Mrs. think they're one of the names of her on our buildings there, Upjohn. She sneaked around there in tennis shoes and with a Volkswagen or so. They make themselves invisible, disguising. So Odysseus comes to Ithaca, he disguises himself, and then moves in because the man had come to his wife for 10 years and wanted to marry her, and she always said, when this shirt there is finished, I'm weaving it, then I will take one of you, and so on. But every night she dissolves what she has weaved during the day, and then starts again next day. So she's able to push the guys who want to marry her away all the time, waiting for Odysseus, being faithful to him. And of course they eat up all her cows and so on. So Odysseus gets quietly in contact with his son and with the old man, their servant, etc. And then he slaughters one of these guys after the other, and with gusto, with unbelievable enjoyment, and he takes his time to butcher them and to frighten them, and so on and so on. So this is all bourgeois attitude. That's not feudal lords anymore. It has nothing to do with honor. It has something to do with cunning. His main thing is cunning. So the feudal lord would ride ahead in the battle, and his servant would carry his shield or whatever. The bourgeois stays at home and produces the ammunition, makes the profit, and sends his workers out there to do the fight, and so on. So it is very important when we want to study Fromm or the critical theorist or whatever, that we have a concept of what that is, civil society. I see again and again that people are not aware of this, what that is, civil society. Astonishing enough, I just found some literature where somebody, I think it is a meeting of scholars, where they really use that civil society, state, family, and religion, and so on. So it's very important to get that and not be subjectivistic or torn into that. We go out and face the real reality. Then we know what Fromm is all about, what Habermas is all about, what Honneth is all about, and so on. So that's important. And when we look at the contemporary issues, and you hear about corruption in Virginia and so on, then if you don't have the concept civil society and the bourgeois and the state and the citoyen, the citizen, that these bourgeois business creeps there are not citizens, and when they get into a job which is a citizen job, they are unbelievably vulnerable. Even if they then put aside their property and put it in trust or whatever, we have precautions. We know what the bourgeois creep is doing when he gets into offices and suddenly disposes of the property of the people as a whole. But it's not enough. It's not enough. I mean, every week you see Christie or what Christie or whatever You see some guy who is even to some extent a citizen, Clinton and so on. Can I say that Clinton was not a citoyen to some extent? But then the bourgeois creeps through again, and he has real estate scandals, and then he has the blowjob scandals, and so on and so on. The bourgeois creeps through. He cannot discipline the thing. That is the fall of the republic. If we cannot get that guy under control, that bourgeois creep, on whatever, but he has to be under control in such a way like a cow is under control. That means he has to get some food, some profit, and then he has to give the milk. If you let him go, like we do, he takes over the whole store. And then you have a cow in the store, trampling around and ruining everything. The Soviets made the opposite mistake, and so did Plato, to repress the bourgeois and to repress civil society, and then you suddenly don't have any hammers anymore, screwdrivers or whatever. So you have to, his greed, of the bourgeois, and that's all he is, he's greed. And he camouflages it under religion and ethics committees and so on. But this greed, evil as it is, it's also a driving force. It does something, what he does not intend. He just intends to get richer and richer. But as he does that, he does produce new things. And so if you repress that, you will not move forward. And so that's this whole thing with Stalinism or red fascism and so on. So nevertheless, back to this patriarchal thing of Bachhofen. Right? He's very important. He was taken by right-wingers, he was taken by Nazis, and he was taken by socialists. So the anthropologists don't think he is true. The anthropologists don't think that there was a matriarchal world civilization first. So we have to think that if they are right or not, we have to find out about that. I think what can be substantiated is that there were particular civilizations which were matriarchal and moved over into patriarchal. But if that is true for all of them, that's another question. Fromm went to the southwest here, to Indian tribes which are patriarchal, and he studied them, and in Mexico too. So we want to leave that open. The anthropologists have to study that more. But nevertheless, Agamemnon comes home, and while he was gone, the patriarchal regime had been replaced by Clytemnestra, his wife. She re-established again the matriarchal order in revenge because he had sacrificed her daughter. And of course, when the women come up, then men's reputation falls and they become little lover boys. And so she had a little lover boy there. And together with him, as Agamemnon comes out of the ship, and they roll up the red carpet, we still have that today, that's where it comes from. So when the president goes somewhere, then a red carpet is put up, or some dignitaries. So the red carpet goes right to the bathroom, and there he takes his bath there, and he has Cassandra with him. Cassandra is a slave girl which he stole from Troy, and she warned him and said, it will not go well, but if you go there, I'll die with you. So that's why we have Cassandra cries sometimes, when somebody says it will not go well, and so on, that's a Cassandra character. So nevertheless, the Clytemnestra kills the father, kills Agamemnon in the bathtub. So that means she asserts matriarchal governance regime and so on. Then there's Orestes. Orestes is not there. He's the son of Agamemnon, and when he comes back, he hears about it, and then he gets to together with his daughter, with his sister Electra. So you have the Oedipus complex, right, and you have the Electra complex. So with Freud, we will see that there. So now, together with the sister, they kill the mother and the lover and re-establish the patriarchal regime again. But then the Erinyes, the spirits, women's spirits, persecute him all through Greece, and he has to run from one place to the other until he comes to Athens. And in Athens happens a reconciliation, and it is done by Athena. Here, this is Athena, the owl, is an example of her. Which was in my school then, the humanistic high school there. So, but Athena, she is a male product. She jumped out of the head of Zeus, like Eve came out of the side of Adam. these are both patriarchal myths. And so the Athena then makes peace, and the Erinyes change into Eumenides, that means into good spirits, but there is a price to be paid for it. Now, Athena reestablishes the patriarchal order, but the women are subordinated under the patriarch. And that is what Backoven then emphasizes, that the Roman law, family law, where the husband could sell his wife, could kill his wife, could kill his children, didn't even have to go to court, that this has been set up in order to prevent, under all circumstances, the return of the repressed, the return of the matriarchal, which has happened with us since the 19th and 20th century in the women organizations, etc., up to the day where all these people marched against abortion, which is called by some people anti-women, and others it's called pro-women, and so on. So it's right with us, the whole thing, right? And it's important that the critical theory is concerned with now. When we are talking about the past, as I've just done, we do that in order to understand ourselves, which is the most difficult of all things, to do that. So, nevertheless, the women are now protected. The man has to protect them. He fights for her. He works for her out in the fields and so on. She takes care of the children and so on. That is the patriarchal arrangement. And under the patriarchy, of course, women and men are distorted. The woman has to adjust herself to the male dominance. And that goes also up to Switzerland, where women, for instance, voted against their own suffrage, because we said we have control over him, the husband, in the kitchen. If he doesn't do what we want him to do, he doesn't get anything to eat, and we will not go to bed with him. And that will drive him nuts. So therefore, we get him under control. But in order to do, you become then a very tricky type of a person. So we don't even know what a real woman would be like, because all the women which we know are all a product of this patriarchal society, and you have to invent tricks how to get the guy under control. But it's true also now for the dominant guy, because he never knows, if he is being had or not, Not to speak that I have a lot of friends who are completely under control of their wives, and sometimes they notice it, sometimes they don't notice it. So she dictates where they go to vacations and where they don't do vacations, and so on. And it is pitiful to see that from a patriarchal point of view. That will be when we look at the movie of Freud there, when you want to criticize him now, then you can say he was patriarchal. He emphasized the strong father. That strong father produced a strong superego. Now, the inroads which feminism made has weakened the father. He is not the king in the house anymore. He's not the priest of the house who leads the prayer or whatever. He is not even the bread giver. The wife has to work too. Sometimes his sons may go to the same factory. And so the best what is left now is that he's a daddy, or he's maybe a friend of his children. Maybe he still can pay for college, but maybe he cannot even do that. And so definitely the patriarchy has declined. And when I taught at General Motors and the workers wrote papers, it was about ethics there, they would say, my wife came home, or I came home and my wife told me that she wants to be emancipated. And I told her, who the hell told you that? I'm not emancipated. Why should you be emancipated? So that's always when the whole society is not emancipated but thinks they are, and then suddenly the blacks ask to be emancipated or the women ask to be emancipated, then of course the unemancipated masses they ask why the hell, and so on. So we have millions of women in this country where the same thing happened. That means he then moves out, and says, okay, you get emancipated, and then they go to the West and get a Japanese woman or whatever who is more domesticated still and more used to patriarchal regime, or he gets one from France or from Germany, at least in the past. It's all gone now too. But in order to have somebody who is still a wife in the sense of Athena and the contract which was made, and not emancipated, that she wants to be equal or something like that. So we are in the middle of this thing, and it is questionable where we want to go. Can we go back to because it is some kind of a secret war going on between the genders, and there are millions of women who are now single parents, and they have to go to West and become social workers so that they can pay for their children, and we have also men who are married, but they don't take the responsibilities anymore. They don't stand up so the wife can depend on them. They also don't hold their promise anymore. They promised once, until death will depart, and death hasn't departed them, but they have departed already many times. And then for better or for worse, and if it gets worse, of course, they just leave. No pope or president or whatever can give an order that this should be done this way or that way. So the critical theory would say that the patriarchy should probably go, but no matriarchy should be established, but values from both, Fromm would say, should be united in a third way. That's dialectical thinking, in that sense that we have maybe a friendship relationship or partnership. And when you go to Europe, you'll see that when you go to a hotel, husband, wife, but most people right now partner. They're not married anymore. They're partners, and not only homosexual partners, but homosexual, heterosexual, and so on. They're all partners now. So an equal partnership, and with a prenup thing, and so on. So there are real, definite changes going on massively, and the children have to suffer the brunt of the thing at the moment. Okay, so we have these reflections in mythology of what really goes on in society, and Bachhofen is a very important person there for Engels and for Marx and for Fromm, and Fromm probably more than anybody else among the critical theorists. How the sapere dare to know that it's Fromm there, because to know means in a society full of deceit, it means to be critical and to be dialectical and to be revolutionary, and one has to have the courage to do that. And it goes into professional things and so on. If you want to be critical, will you get grants? Will they give grants to critical people? We have all these programs about critical thinking or whatever, but it has very little to do with critical thinking. And when you really do it, will they let you live? And can you do it in such an intelligent way that they don't notice it? Or can you imitate the cunning bourgeois by being more cunning than he is, and so on? So, and can you stay healthy when you become a nonconformist? So I have thousands of students who made these experiences from the 60s on, right, who wanted to become critical and then became nuts in the process. So one must really know what one is doing if one wants to become critical of the bourgeois society. The bourgeois society has to feed you in order to be critical. If they don't feed you, put you in the slums, you can sleep with your criticism, and it's all over. So that's a very complicated thing, and it goes into words, so that Horkheimer sometimes didn't use the word bourgeois, because he knew that's a red flag there, and they will all jump or so. So it's okay, that you say middle class. Middle class is wishy-washy, it says almost nothing, and that is very helpful. So, but I just tell you that you have to be aware of what happens. As long as you are conform and you're ordinary. I had a discussion about ordinary with the federal government about taxation, and they shouted at me and they said, "You are not ordinary." Of course, I said, "I'm not ordinary. Why should I be ordinary?" And so then we had to clarify this, and it took us months and months, but I won in the end. So sometimes, but it takes so much time. It happened even twice. And I spent the whole summer in order to discuss with the federal government about tax things, what education is, and the state of Michigan is a failed state in terms of education and many other things. And but after 3 or 4 months, the federal government accepted it, and I won every time. but it needs so much work and so on. And acrobatics, once I took all my 7 boxes of tax material, I took over, they had an office here, the federal government, and I put it all on their desks there, and I shouted. They were all sitting in little cubicles, so I made sure that they could hear it in all the little cubicles and so on. The next time when I came, they were all gone. They had all been fired for some reason or the other. There was only one left, and he said, "Now, what do you want to pay now?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Well, you don't want to pay nothing." I said, "Exactly." I said, "Well, then you pay nothing." And I went. He just gave up. He was just beaten in his heart. I felt sorry for him. He also was leaving. He left the federal government, went to some kind of a private accountant somewhere. Okay, so this is just about our mottos, right? I forgot this last time, but we want to make sure of this. So, okay, now it's your turn. Do you have any comment on this, or any questions on this whole thing, what we are talking about? See, you have to tell me, where you stand, so that I talk really to you and to your interests. Your interests in the department and so on, and what you want to do and so on. We should streamline and form everything in such a way that it's useful for you, right? Now, if I talk stuff which is useless for you, then you have to say it, right? And then we can, the more questions you ask, the better I know where we should go. Okay, so in that sense we are flexible. We have these points, they're talking points or so, but we are not bound to them. We can deviate from them. So just reflect back for a moment on that, what I said about these mottos, and see if there's anything terribly strange which I can explain once more. It was under our point number 1, questions about the last time when we talked about our syllabus, I think, different points. Anything?
Yeah, I've got something.
Good.
The quote by Augustine there, and kind of talking about how the end purpose of history is human, is being human, but then going back to the first Heraclitus quote where everything moves and nothing is forever. So it seems that there's some conflict between those two views where we are the end product and we're the kind of the best things can be, but really, are we? What's eventually we'll evolve and something better will take place.
I mean, the quotations there, they show that everything's moving, but it doesn't say where it is going.
Yeah.
So Heraclitus had a logos, like in Christianity, the logos was with God and God was with the logos and so on. And that logos, the symbol for the logos was fire. And this logos gave direction to the movement toward the fundamental goal, where everything was going to. So, and this is true for all the Heraclitean people, up to Hegel and so on. So, when we look at Schopenhauer, who had Hegel in contempt because he was so optimistic, why Hegel was optimistic was not the description of the slaughter bench of history, which goes on, which you see on television all day long. Syria or whatever, in Egypt and so on. That Hegel and Schopenhauer had in common. But Hegel said when you see this horrible negativity, you have to go back to the beginning, and that's something mythological, they could say. And the beginning, it says, reason governs the world, providence governs the world. And then reason and providence contain in themselves a goal, and that goal is the realm of freedom which Marx took over then. And this realm of freedom for Hegel was a divine human freedom. And we have to see here what freedom means. I have one in my other class who is in the philosophy department and who made it the task of his life to destroy the idea of freedom, that we are not free at all and there is no freedom or whatever. So there is, to start with that, can start with introspection and so on. For instance, if he makes this decision to destroy freedom, is that a free decision when he makes it? Or if it is not, then who forced him to do that, So that would be an introspective thing. But it's much better to see what other people thought about this before us. And there's the idea, that the people before us were not really stupid, So the Greeks were very smart people. So were the Mesopotamians, and so were the the Egyptians. They found counting machines which were the ancestors of our computers and so on. So they worked hard. Where we are, is the result of the hard work of generations and generations of not stupid people. To say, of course, Aristotle made his mistakes, so did Plato, and so did Hegel, and so on. But so do we. But that doesn't mean that they did not make enormous steps forward. So it is something amazing when you think, that the Third Estate, after it had guillotined, and before already guillotined the clergy and guillotined the nobility and the king in England and France and so on, that they suddenly came up with that prejudice that the absolute cannot be known. There are 6,000 years of definitions of the absolute, and there come these blacksmiths and these merchantmen or whatever, who had only analytical understanding developed in themselves, and say, that's the only one can think, and you cannot think any differently, and we cannot think the absolute. We can only think finite things, and so on. That's enormous, when you think, of all that work which has been done before. And Nietzsche made fun of that, He said, this guy there, Kant, Immanuel Kant, used the whole apparatus of science in order to prove what everybody knew already, namely that one cannot know God.
Well, that's interesting because, again, the quote above that, the block quote, the best thing about religion is that it makes heretics.
Yeah.
And
right.
to destroy that and to say that you can't question, the
right.
unknown, that kind of leaves no room for heretics against.
Right. So heretics are very
establishment.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So, but back to your question now. We want to go formulate it again. Say it again.
Yeah, I was just talking about the if humans are the end result of history, then how can it be? It seems like too concrete of a point to be a critical
now
stance.
So you have to think Bloch. Of course he is a Schelling guy, and Schelling was a friend of Hegel, and then they were not so friendly anymore. But when Hegel died in 1831, then Schelling took his chair once more in Berlin for 10 years, so he survived in 10 years, and he turned into positivism. He became a positivist, and one of his students was Müller. Müller became the initiator of the science of religion, which is our department, So that is where it comes from. It's a positivistic department. So that as far as the say it again now. I'm losing your point.
I guess the Augustine quote.
Yeah. So we want to see what Bloch, comes from Schelling, of Hegel, of course, too, and Kant too, and so on, and then Marx. So Marx took that over from Hegel in terms of the realm of freedom. That's where everything goes to. But what does that freedom mean now for Marx and so on? Sometimes Fromm calls that freedom being. So what does this being mean? And he opposes it to having, So I think we have to get the concept of freedom clear of that. We have to get that clear. So freedom can, of course, mean, that I go to the store and I can choose, this or that commodity or this type of commodity and so on. And that everybody understands that. But this is not really freedom. The market analysts, they take a little toilet paper and then they do research and they found out that higher percentage of women like lila toilet paper, and then they advertise and they put it in the store, and then come these women and they put Tchaikovsky music, da 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 da. Then they come in and they put all this lila toilet paper into their baskets and they spend all that money, and then they come home, they're horribly disappointed. Their husband shouted at them because of all the lila toilet paper and so on and so on, but it's done. Now they would say that people are really moving on rails, so there is no freedom involved. But is there another freedom? There was another concept, and that is that freedom is the absence of alienation. Freedom is the absence of alienation. That means I am free when I go outside of myself toward another person, and in solidarity with him or her return to myself. That means that the other person allows me to return home to myself. This going out and this returning, that is freedom. the returning is freedom. Take a student, a student who cannot make up which girlfriend he wants to take finally, because he says, when I decide for this particular woman, then I am not free anymore. I am caught, So therefore, it's better not to decide for any woman. Then he would say, what discipline? Should I go into philosophy or sociology or whatever? Well, I don't want to decide, because when I decide for sociology, I cannot do all the other things and so on. So, but part of freedom is that this universal ego has to, and everybody says I, it has no content, first of all, but then this I has to make a particular decision for this girlfriend and for this discipline. Only then it becomes real. There are people who don't grow up and to have this abstract idea of freedom. Freedom is the ego which can abstract from everything in theory and in praxis. And then they sit there and they don't get anywhere. So therefore, this step into the particular, into the finite, has to be made. But at the same time, as you are in this discipline, in this marriage and so on, you have to be one with yourself. It has to allow you to come back. Otherwise, you are alienated. Alienated means you go out and you cannot return. The workers produce, $100 a day, and only $30 return to them. Most of that, what they put out, does not return to them. That's alienated labor. Or, like I did, you put coal, you dig coal, or you put fenders on a car and so on. It doesn't show anything of you, I can say this is a Picasso up there. But when you look at this car, Siebert put the fender on, nobody knows anything. And so on. So that means Picasso could return to himself in that picture there, So a German officer came to him once in French exile, and he said, who did this? And Picasso said, you did. The Germans took out, bombed that poor town there and ruined it all. So there was a trial thing for bombing London and so on. So, but it is not the assessment, it was Picasso who did it, and he could see himself, and everybody could see himself in this, and he could return to himself. That is the liberating art of art. And also in religion, see, there are images, of God as a feudal lord, God as a capitalist, God as a slaveholder. We are his servant, we are the slaves, and so on. Then people are not returning to themselves, and they are alienated in religion. You have religious alienation, so which Marx fought, and rightly so. Okay, so therefore, this realm of freedom meant for Marx that people could express all their energies, their seeing, their hearing, their touching, their feelings, their analytical understanding, their dialectical rationality, etc. All that. And then, when you are in the slums, you cannot do this. You cannot be. It doesn't let you be. That means there's no real music which elevates, which actualizes your ears. There are no real pictures in which your eyes become developed and so on. You have no science, you have no philosophy, you have a miserable religion, you don't make any trips and so on. That is the hell on the other side there. And we live there and feel good. So it is horrifying. But then you have, why don't we see this? Because of the necessary appearance, which is called ideology. Right? So the ideology identifies causes for this situation. So my son from New York tells me about the poor in New York. They don't have the Protestant work ethics. That means the reason why they are there is not that the owners have stolen the surplus value from them and inherited to their children, and they inherit the poverty and so on. No, it is their damned laziness. They want to be on welfare. They want to have unemployment compensation because they get more there than they would do when they work. Well, why don't you increase the surplus, increase the minimum wage, make it a family wage? Maybe then it would be attractive, and they would. Then they say, no, they don't do that neither, and so on. So there you see, in every analysis which you do, see the hell. So the question with the Sabbath now is, the seventh day is the Sabbath. the Sabbath commandment is for some Jews the highest commandment at all. So you have to be completely elevated to Yahweh and be one with yourself in Yahweh, and you must not even walk, and you must not talk, and you must not cook, and so on and so on. So one has to see that Sabbath is then an eschatological symbol. The world historical process goes to this Sabbath, and in this Sabbath man can be. He is allowed to be himself. He can come out of the alienation of the capitalistic system, feudal system, slaveholder system, and can really come home to himself. And the two deviations of that is Don Juan and is Narcissus. We are a completely narcissistic society, as anybody ever was narcissistic. When I go online again, religion is, I'm feeling this, I feel that. Morality, analytical philosophy tells me it's just an emotion, and so on and so on. It drives me nuts, you know. I mean, if I wouldn't be hardened, you know, by 50 years of asceticism, I could never stand to read anything of this, you know. But instead of that, I can read it very lovingly, and I can very lovingly then answer, you know, why analytical philosophy does that and where it comes from and how that happened, and so on and so on. So, and that is how it should be, right? Nobody should be looked down. A student just wrote and said, you know, I was trained in analytical philosophy. Can I bring this up? And so, why the hell should you not bring it up? You know, I mean, Habermas's children, you know, were all positivists, both daughters, and he talked with them, and they convinced him that it is important to talk with analytical philosophers who come from the Vienna School or from London and so on. Tom Lawson was one of us here in the department, you know, and so on. And I was always happy that we had a dialectical theory of religion and we had a positivistic one. So we must be completely open, and I will never ask him to convert or whatever. So the only thing, you know, what he can learn is there is an alternative. There's an alternative to what I see. And he said, you know, and I'm led by my analytical theories to nihilism. And I said, so that means your theories, you know, become apoetical. Aporia means no way anymore. So you have to find, you know, some other way so that it opens up again. You don't want to live as a nihilist or apoetically for the rest of your life. So, and then here's an alternative, you know, but you may find a better one, you know. And the critical theory embraces a lot of people like Nietzsche and Schopenhauer, and they go in all directions. So it is a very rich and confusing thing, and we have to talk about this confusion and how you can, when you read there, how you can bring order into it. And therefore I gave you that roadmap, because that helps you to see, where is this guy from now? You know, is there in the realm of subjectivity? Does he talk about civil society? Does he talk about religion? Because they're interdisciplinary, so they talk about this, and it's all interconnected, you know. But this interconnection can become horribly confusing. So when we say, you know, Narcissus, that is the guy who sees his own image in this lake there all the time, and he cannot penetrate any otherness, you know. So when they talk today now about should we send troops to Russia, do they need us, and so on and so on, they have no idea, you know, how the Russians think or how the Ukrainians think or whatever. It's all so American. It is so closed up in oneself, and one would say, hell, kick yourself in the ass, open yourself up, let some wind come in, you know, that you know how these people think, how this Putin or whatever thinks. And the same thing is with the Syrians. They have met them now in Switzerland, you know. They want to have Saddam, what is his name, Saddam? Assad, yeah. They want to have Assad out of it, but it is not really possible or whatever. They don't know how this Muslim party, where he comes from, what is it?
Alawites.
The Alawites, yeah, and then the influence of the people in Saudi Arabia. They are called what? Wahhabi, which are strong to now, and so how these people think and how one can talk to them, and they don't know. The Iranian foreign minister was there, and he said, well, Washington thinks we gave up. We have given up nothing. And it's all it all has something to do with a national type of narcissism, not only individuals, but national narcissism. So we can be who we are because we like the way we are, but that should not prevent us, to see that other people are different, and it must not disturb us. As a matter of fact, we may become more who we are when we see how the others are. We can even say, I never want to be like these people. I'm really happy that I am. But we have to break through and have to understand their logic and their words and their vocabulary and the little intonations, of the voice when they say something and so. And so that is Narcissus. So Narcissus is one way how freedom does not work, because freedom cannot be realized because Narcissus is not able to go out. And when you cannot go out, you cannot return. And return means freedom. So therefore your freedom is abstract. You cannot go out to this woman and see her otherness. You cannot go into that discipline there and see the strangeness of this discipline. I have sometimes students who sit there and they listen and they have no idea what is said, because they think they know it already all. So they are narcissistically closed up, and there is no way that anything new can penetrate from there. So Narcissus is one pathology of reason and freedom. The other pathology is Don Juan. Don Juan and Mozart and so on. He can go out, and he has 1,000 women in Spain and 3,000 in Italy and 5,000 in Germany or whatever. And he cannot return from any of them. And it is not even the women. He meets some decent women, a few, but he does not respond to it. He flies from one to the other like a little bumblebee, and has no way to come back. And when you cannot go out, this is hell, and when you cannot return, that is hell. And so Mozart puts him into hell. That's where the hole opens up in the little fire, and poor Don Juan goes in there, into the hell there. So these are the form we wanted to talk about: pathology, right, and pathology of freedom, pathology of normalcy. Fromm talks about pathology of normalcy, because Narcissus may become normal. You can say everybody is Narcissus, or everybody runs from one woman to the other. So it's this type of a normalcy which is not really normal, and it is really pathological. And can one see this? When you go to the insane asylum up there, you'll see that they think you are nuts, and that they are, affirm each other that they are the Emperor of China and Jesus Christ. And if you say, yes, of course, you're Jesus Christ, of course, you're the Emperor of China, how are your Majesty doing now? And they're perfectly happy. And so this is for every, it's for the normal society as well. One reaffirms oneself in one's narcissism. It becomes a matter of culture. Everybody does it, and since everybody does it, therefore it is normal. That is all, so it's kind of a hellish type of thing. So, and nevertheless, the critical theorist dared, Fromm's dared to think about those things and maybe try to do something about it. This analytical guy here, who wrote me today, a wonderful fellow there, he thought, that there's no way to bridge any of these antagonisms and to reconcile religious or secular, or reconcile the individual or the collective or whatever. So he goes to one side. It is very atomistic, the theory. He thinks it's our emotions because of which we say, this or that is wrong. I just feel that at the moment and so on. Something like, I did what I thought was right, or what I felt was right, but so did Hitler, so did Stalin. They all did this, it has nothing to do with ethics. So I don't know if, these analytical philosophers, they should know what they are doing. Leaving people, in a nihilistic position, it's not a very nice thing. And soldiers came home after the First World War and the Second World War, and they were nihilistic. and Paul Tillich, tried to get him out of this whole thing, and so there's all kinds of philosophies and ethics which are as nihilistic as these people, these veterans who come back, and it's understandable when they come back from Afghanistan or Iraq, and that they think that way or stop thinking. Okay, anything else? Any other question? What is the time now?
8:30.
Huh?
8:30.
So we have a little bit of time. Should we make a break now?
I think so. Sure.
Okay, have a cookie break. I left the lights on upstairs. If you have to go to the toilet, you can go upstairs. And is it too warm, or should we change it?
Usually block.
Oh, wonderful. Okay,
That one just came out.
just came out. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Yeah, he is. See, we talked about him. So can I give you a check then?
Well, I can order another one, and
Okay,
then this
can
one.
you order for both of us?
Yep, and then that one just came out too. That's the new bio of
Oh,
Benjamin.
wonderful. Oh, there's really stuff coming out massively. Huh?
Uh-huh.
So get both of them for both of us.
Okay.
And
And
then
then I still got to get you the autobiography.
I pay for both of them.
Okay. I'll get you Malcolm's autobiography.
I the biography from,
Yeah, there's the really small one, which is really small print, and then there's the bigger one. So I'll try to get the bigger print one.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it's but maybe $5 more or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Give me the bigger one.
Can't see the human book.
Oh, and this as well. This, if you want this, you can have it. I've got 2 copies of it.
All right. Look at this. Okay, I pay for it too then.
That's mostly in German.
Count it all together. Yeah, very good.
Okay.
Anna Arendt, lover of
Heidegger.
Yeah.
And it's about Eichmann and the trial of Eichmann.
Oh, really?
When she covers it for her book, the
Yeah.
Eichmann in Jerusalem.
Well, we can also use it here.
Yeah, we can. But it goes back and forth. She has flashbacks back to Heidegger,
Uh-huh.
and Hans Jonas is in the whole
Oh,
thing,
yeah, yeah.
and the whole. I mean, it's really good.
Okay, maybe a few scenes at least we can see, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, if you give me that, then you put it all together, the books and this, and
Okay.
I'll give you the checks then.
All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Should be able to do that by. I'll order those tomorrow.
Okay.
I can do that tomorrow. So.
And we go on Monday, right?
Yes, Monday at 2:00. So we have to meet in the same building up at State that we were at last time.
Okay. And I don't have to walk so far, right?
No. Yeah, we'll park right at the hall and we'll
there were
go.
some chairs on the way too, right?
What's that?
There were some chairs on the way.
Yeah.
I think I remember.
Yeah, Todd, I think he has to run away like halfway through our meeting because he's got to go teach
Okay.
somewhere else, a different building.
I don't think they have too much to talk about, do they?
I hope not. It's a little bit cold on that side of the house. Isn't
Yeah. We call it shut off from the rest of the circulation.
Before he built all this, he raised 7 kids in the house.
Is that side of it?
Wow.
Yeah, Rudy, when did you build this addition? Do you remember what
10
year?
years ago.
10 years ago?
Mhm. Maybe 11 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was such a lucky thing that I did this. Just think how I could work within this office there on campus,
Yeah.
But I would have to go there every day, and then there's no room in these little offices.
No. Former dorm rooms.
Yeah, I mean, for scholarly life, you need some circumstances, Need some outside stuff, too. Otherwise, it doesn't work. I worked in my bedroom there for years and years.
Yeah.
That's awful.
My ex-wife always said my office was my shrine to myself.
That's really how
Yeah, that's why she's the ex-wife.
how it may look like that, yeah. My poor wife always said I was married with Plato.
Married to Plato.
Yeah. He was the third man in our marriage, Plato. I think it was an exaggeration, but...
But it had some truth to it, Tom.
Yeah, I just want to show you, I did, I write text to the people online there, and I wrote a text to Martin Luther King Day.
Did you see the report that said the 85 richest people in the world had more money than the lowest 3.5 billion?
Yeah.
Yep.
It will not go well in the long run, right?
Let's get the 3.5 billion spit on them at the same time while 85 will drown, Done.
I mean, the guys even here, they see that this...
I feel like it might be hard to get the golf.
Yeah, right.
will not go well.
And the 85.
And the 85, right. They all know each other, though.
I just want to read this to you there. We talked about Malcolm, and his father was assassinated and mother lived here in the insane asylum. But I just wanted to see something on the liberal leaders there. I didn't give you the whole text there. And that liberal leaders have been infinitely more threatened and less protected than the dictators like Stalin, Hitler, Mussolini, Franco, Pavlovich, or even Mao Zedong. Abraham Lincoln, the American president who led the war for the liberation of the African American slaves in the South, was assassinated in 1865. President James Garfield became the victim of murder in 1881. President William McKinley in 1901. President Kennedy in 1963, and his brother in 1968. The liberal presidents Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, and Truman had been targets of assassination attempts. Those leaders who wanted what was good were persecuted. A model of all of them served the founder of Christianity and so on. So some of them were Christians, some of them were liberals. Robert Kennedy had the right thing in mind. He wanted to end the war in Vietnam. His death was a new proof that the good had to be more sacrifices in this world than the badness everywhere. It is the task of the dialectical ideology and of the project to follow the liberal leaders and to strengthen and to develop further theological, secular, humanistic idea from which love originated. Okay, so but there was something else which I had there.
The Malcolm piece, right?
Well, that was for online here.
The online.
Yeah. But one thing I put in too was what the son said, the son of Martin Luther King. I think that was amazing, because it's what is always repressed. And because, he's made a racial leader, black people and so on and so on. But why he was really killed was that he went border and border.
Right.
That he took the white garbage collectors and then the white workers and then suddenly the Vietnam workers. I mean, then he really went overboard, And this was the last speech there. He knew somehow what was happening, We will go to the mountaintop and I may not be with you and so on and so on. So.
Yeah, we forget how hated he was.
Yeah.
68 especially.
Well, I mean, he was hated by the whites because he was so intransigent, He held on to his goal, But he was hated by the blacks too because he was not brutal enough, It's this non-violence thing they didn't grasp,
Yeah.
Okay. Are we ready to do a little bit more? And then we don't want to forget our movie there. So I hope everything is clear now about our, I gave you this syllabus, right? And so just don't forget to read the first part there, the course description, that's our textbook, and then background reading. I think the first reading, so background reading, is from critical theory to critical political theology, and personal autonomy and universal solidarity. The purpose of the book is to introduce us into the methodology of dialectics, because that is the strangest thing for us. We all have a positivistic background, and I see that with the students online, they're also, it is not to make dialecticians out of us, but just to see that there is an alternative to the positivistic thinking. And it's not a condemnation of positivistic thinking as such, because they have done hard work of statistics, the sampling, it cannot be done better. So they have really done great things, the positivists, and also Parsons with developing the system in very detail, and many others. So that should be appreciated. And then, as far as the depth study is concerned, you can choose, from when you see the depth study in the back, there are a few books about Fromm, there are a few books about by Habermas, or about and Honest. So you can concentrate during the semester, take one book from one and so on. You can take others too. You're not bound to those three. You can take other critical theories too. You can go into novels, So Thomas Mann was one whom Adorno loved deeply, and Thomas Mann is one of those poets who reflects what critical theory is. So you can have critical theory also in the forms of novels or dramas. Brecht does that to some extent. Brecht didn't think Brecht thought the critical theories were too fat, and they didn't move fast enough. They met in Los Angeles all the time, but he maybe have doubts too if they were really Marxist in the full sense of the word, but a lot of his thinking is present also in. So if you want to choose, Thomas Mann or how was this? Well, there are others which I mentioned that you can do that too. But our concentration in this discourse is on a few books of Fromm, and they are sitting there already, and a few books of Habermas, and a few books of Honest, and we want to have one background reading a month and one depth study a month. But don't feel pressed there what you can do. You have other works and so on and so on. Dialectical thinking, you will see, is more difficult. It will take more time. So if you take 1-2 chapters of that, that's fine. That should get some taste of it. Tests, I think we will take take-home tests, 3 take-home tests, one a month. So one would be in the beginning of February, beginning of March, beginning of April. We can also do one less if you think. The thing is not the grades, but it's really that you get an impression of what critical theory is and what some of these critical theories want and how different it is from the culture in which we live. Then grading, every time when we're here you get a grade, so when everybody asks a question or so, that is A++, and you go to heaven. If you are consuming and so on cookies and my words, then you get a B. If you are not here, we get an F. And so there are objectives of the course there, and if we reach our goals, and then there's also something about academic honesty, so there shouldn't be any plagiarism. But if some of you, say that in the other classes too, if you want to cooperate and it sounds a little bit similar in the end, that's fine with me. The cooperation is okay, it's good. The roadmap is very important, and I mentioned this already. So when you get confused and you read Fromm, you don't know where he is really, it is good to look at the first page there of the thing, and then when he talks as a psychologist, then he is there, human subjectivity, that's why he's moving. But if he follows Marx or whatever, then he is really in civil society, that's where he's talking about, Now, when he wants to combine these two, Freud and human subjectivity and Marx there, that's when it really gets complicated, But you have others, you have Marcuse, who does the same thing, Wilhelm Reich, but does the same thing. But interdisciplinary, it's not so easy as people think it sometimes, because the disciplines have a different language, and they have a different objective reality they are relating themselves to. Then they do talk about the family, right? So then, but when Marcuse, Fromm, and Horkheimer talk about the family and their family project, you suddenly see that that Marcuse wrote, big essay on Luther and Calvin and so on, and you ask what the hell does that have to do with it? So then he moves to religion up there, and religion is combined with the family and the authority in the family and so on. So it becomes, when they get best, namely when they combine things, that everything's interconnected, it becomes also horribly confusing. And then you can reorientate yourself and you can say, well, what is this Fromm really talking about? And already, social psychology, it's partially in human subjectivity and it is partially in civil society, and he goes back and forth there and tries to combine that. And this is a very dialectical type of thinking, and the Jewish dialectics is even more complicated than the Greek ones is, even than Hegel was. So that makes it more difficult. Okay, so it can help us that we are not concerned with religion as such, but it comes in. I was impressed unbelievably how deeply he was involved in Judaism, and his grandfather was a rabbi, and the father was a wine factory guy, but he was very active in the synagogue in Frankfurt. He died when Hitler came into power or whatever, but he was active in the synagogue, has a big gravestone in Frankfurt in the thing there. So also the friend he married, Frieda the Reichmann or whatever, he had an institute with her, psychoanalytic institute in Heidelberg, and that was some kind of a Jewish monastery or whatever. So they read the Talmud and psychoanalysis at the same time. So it was only when he was 26 or 28 when he made some kind of a cut and freed himself more from Judaism. So, and also Horkheimer, the family, they lived kosher and so on. So one cannot bypass the religious thing, religious background. And, since Judaism and Christianity and Islam, they belong to the Abrahamic faith community, so there are great similarities between them, and we can stress the similarities more than the difference, and for the time being. Okay, so then you have these antagonisms, and they produce cognitive dissonance in Americans particularly. They don't want to talk about antagonisms. I think the background is the Civil War. It's the unbelievable horror of the Civil War, a million people dead, butchered each other of the same country, and so on. So, but if we want to improve things, we have to look at these these antagonisms. But most important is for us, the first one, about the secular and the religious, but also about nature and man. This antagonism is important. The matriarchal and the patriarchal, we discussed that today. It's here that is an important antagonism. The collective and the individual, the bourgeoisie and the workers are important. And when I give these lectures in February about the Pope, is the Pope a liberal, is the Pope a Marxist, is the Pope a solidarist? That will have something to do with the bourgeois and the workers. Left and right is very important. It's all a little bit more complicated here in this country than it's in other parts of the world. So we know right are the neoliberals, left are the Roosevelt liberals, and they are struggling all the time and about welfare and whatever. And the real partner in the whole thing, the Labour Party, is not even there. If there was a Labour Party, they could not possibly have voted down the food stamp program. They could not possibly have voted down the extension of the unemployment compensation. That can only happen under a bourgeois party, And so that is, for me, that's always horrifying. And they babble there around. There are these two sides, and they fight each other. And then suddenly they tell us, that Clinton is best friends now with Bush, They love each other. Mrs. Bush said, I love this Clinton, He says, Clinton had no father, now my husband is his father, Of course, they're both liberals. What do you expect, They're just two forms of liberalism. So Of course they love each other, even if they fight against each other, they still love each other. And they're both paid by the same corporations, So it is really, and I don't think, as far as the Republic is concerned, it's a great experiment, and I really love it. And like Goethe and Hegel, they were all American politicians. They were all pro-America, not for the Slavic world. I'm looking at the Slavic world at the time, all the time too, but it would be really unbelievably sad story, if this experiment here would collapse into fascism or something like that. It would be a nightmare for the rest of the human species. So these are the left and right thing, and then, the Labour Party is missing, and that makes the whole boat lopsided. That means it's like a big ocean liner which is listing, it's hanging to one side, to the right all the time. And so, but you don't have to go into all of these. You see there, I could have put, 50 more on it if you want to. I can deliver them to you there. And then, of course, there's one between subject and object. That has something to do with narcissism, that means this inability to penetrate the rationality of things, the rationality of the family, the rationality of the society, and so on. If we want to discuss those culture wars, today is a culture war. Culture war in Washington, D.C. Thousands of people marched against abortion today, and the Republicans gave speeches and so on. So they want to undo it. I think it is the anniversary of Roe v. Wade. Oh, yeah, right. So that's why that came up again. So now some people say, we Republicans think we have a chance because there are so many people statistically who are against abortion, or they don't want to have late abortion, so they will be on our side, or they want children to go to their parents if they have an abortion, or they want to have wives to go to their husbands before they have an abortion, and so on. And so maybe we will get votes. But, this is one way to think about it, what makes us more popular, what gives us more women in the next state election, next federal election, and so on. But there is another question, what is the truth in God's name about the whole thing? So we have 1.5 million abortions every year. I don't think that the people who are for, the human rights, or for women, they have a right to do with their body or whatever, that they are for abortion. That is, they would like to get the number down of abortions, And so they come up with things like adoption, The adoption rate is very low, so one doesn't ask why not many of these little embryos, when they grow up, could be adopted. Why do they have to be killed or whatever? But how does one decide that now? And one level is legal, another is public opinion and so on. But isn't it possible to penetrate to the truth or whatever? That's completely missing. And only the question already appears idiotic to ask a question like that, because everything is subjective. I hear that all the time, online and everywhere. Everything's subjective. Everybody has his own religious opinions. Everybody has his own ethical opinions. And so, isn't there any way, that the subject can break through to the objective rationality of the body, for instance, or of marriage? So, like we have it there in the first page, under A, the form of the body, and the assimilation process, the eating and drinking and so on, and then the species process. There is something objectively going on which is given to us. We did not give our body to ourselves. My colleague there, the psychiatrist from Lebanon, when people want to kill themselves in the hospital, he would go to them and said, well, where does your body come from? Have you made it? No. Well, if you haven't made it, you cannot take it. And then that was the solution to the whole thing. The poor woman couldn't, endure her suffering anymore. She hadn't anybody to go home to, so she wanted to die. But she was afraid that she would be punished for her sin. Now, how do you solve this? And he said, well, Allah made you. and you cannot take your own life. So you have to go on with the suffering. Medicine cannot do anything for you anymore because the end of the rope, now, is that, how? I mean, in a certain sense, his religion gave the not psychiatry, but his religion gave the psychiatrist an objective, rational structure. That it is how it objectively is. There is your body, you have to eat and to drink and other things and so on. And then there is this process of the genus process and so on. And that is objectively given. As a matter of fact, we share it even with many other animals, with the birds and the fish and the squirrels and so on and so on. And so, can one penetrate through this? Or are there political and emotional or whatever moves between us, our own subjective rationality, and the objective rationality which is in the body and in the family and in the state and so on? It is sometimes as if they had no idea, for instance, that love is the basis of the family. Needs are the basis of the civil society. The law is the basis of the state and so on. It is so simple, but it all gets confused all the time. So that is what be one of these antagonisms. We have no metaphysics. The country never had many physics. What they have is an anti-metaphysical metaphysics, which is called positivism, which does not give them the chance to break through anything. Yes.
We've got maybe only 5 minutes or so. Did you want to look at the movie?
Yeah, let's look at the movie. Very good. Let's stop here now, okay? So we know what to do and how to move, and let's look at the Freud movie.
So for next week, you want us to bring some kind of current event and start to do background reading?
Right. So you will see there are a lot going on. I mean, today already you have that march there, and today also the president met people about rape in colleges and universities. 1 out of 5 students is raped on our campuses. So these are the controversies.
That's right. Come on, we're going to San Francisco right away.
Thought you were watching the Stooges or something.
I know it. I always watch it. It's in front of us. That's good. So let's maybe do 10 minutes or so.
Okay.
Well, let's see, maybe 15 minutes. We can do a little bit overtime. Start it maybe. Will that start where we left off there? Maybe.
Yeah, we'll see. Probably not.
Here we are. So just let's go a little bit forward.
How did human beings come to be
It
what
won't
they
skip.
are?
Won't skip.
So I'll just fast forward
Yeah, just go forward.
massively.
Yeah, we had all this. It kind of remind us what we did.
Yeah. We're at the point where we're in this dream.
Yeah. Yeah, there we had her already, right?
Yeah. You've been looking at this thing for 30 years, haven't you?
Well, this earth was a memory of my dying
That's the
grandfather.
stream there, right?
Right, this is where we were with the birds, right?
That's where we were, okay.
So perhaps I had placed
So,
my
he
father
wrote a
on
book
that
in
field.
1900, he wrote a book about dreams,
And those birds
very
had another
famous.
meaning.
He actually wrote it in
in
1899. Yeah. But he wanted to publish it in 1900, so it was the book for the new century.
Right. That is the German word for sexual
And it came
intercourse.
directly from the German word for bird. Vogel.
Yeah.
The forbidden meaning of the dream was revealed.
So there is a manifest meaning of the dream, which you have every night, and then there is a hidden meaning. And the psychoanalysis brings out the hidden meaning.
By the dream was sexual anxiety. My dream, really, it was a jealous wish for the death of my father and erotic desire for my mother.
So that is the Oedipus complex, right?
Working with his
And for
patient's
girls, it's
accounts
the
of
Erich
dreams and the
complex.
free associations, and with his own dreams and associations, Freud developed the principles and techniques of psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis, said Freud, showed that man has less control than he thinks over his irrational, unconscious, primitive urges.
So that is the death drive in the id,
These
then there is the
urges,
erotic
Freud
drive
believed,
in the id.
originate in our earliest
Both
years.
are more powerful than we know in our everyday
Unlike other
consciousness.
animals, humans are highly dependent for almost a quarter of their lives. In this world of dependency, particularly in the first 5 or 6 years of life, said Freud, the human personality is shaped. The child is psychologically the father of the man. Before
That's why
Freud,
we
it
have
was
that
seldom
family
thought that
book,
a child
right?
could have real
Why the family is
emotions.
so important,
like an
because
animal.
that's where the character is formed.
Childhood was thought of as carefree, innocent, and happy. Freud drew another picture, an infant world that pulses with feeling. Brothers and sisters are resentful of the newcomer. Parents, consciously or unconsciously, may not want the child. Relations in the family are competitive, said Freud. The child is driven by desires and jealousies that cannot be appeased. So, the feelings of the child are not childlike. They are feelings of aggression and erotic desire. These intense emotions naturally first focus on the mother. She becomes the first object of the child's love, and this relationship becomes the model for all later loves, whether the child is a boy or a girl. This erotic love, said Freud, is not unmixed. There is aggression in it too, for after all, the child is soon aware of being under the absolute rule of the mother. The father too provoked strong mixed emotions, said Freud. Love, yes, but fear and hatred too, when the child senses that the father is the rival who comes between the child and the mother. According to Freud, these early emotional turmoils set a pattern deep in our unconscious mind. A mother we love but also fear because of her power over us. A father we love but also hate because he robs us of our first love. This I call the Oedipus complex, after the tragic Greek king. That each man must desire his mother and wish to kill his father. It was
It's
not
important
until
that
he
we
was
know
almost
those
50 that
foundations
Freud
in
was
order to
finally
see
given the
how
rank
they
of
modified
professor,
or revised
an appointment that
whole
required the
thing
approval
later
of
on.
the Austrian emperor. Professorships seldom went to Jews or to radical thinkers.
He was 50 years old when he became a full professor.
It was as though the role of sexuality had suddenly been realized by His Majesty. Importance of dreams confirmed by the Council of Ministers, and the necessity of treating hysteria by psychoanalytic therapy accepted in Parliament by a two-thirds
Ironical and
majority.
cynical.
I had become respectable again. Those who recently
I went to
avoided
his
me
house in London. He
now
fled
greet me
from
afar in the
Vienna to
street.
London and lived there with his daughter Anna, a
When
child
Freud's views on
psychoanalyst.
sexuality in children became known, he was widely attacked for
He
defiling
had
the
to
image
appear
of
before the
childhood innocence.
Gestapo in Vienna.
But Victorian
That gave him the
sentimentality
signal
often
to
hid
leave.
attitudes toward children that were unloving, rigid, and even cruel. Chiefly because of Freud, we came to see children as human beings. We became less sentimental about them, but in fact more truly kind than before. From his studies, Freud developed a theory of the human personality. This is what I've discovered. There is the self we think we are, the self that attempts to deal with
That's
the
important
outside
now.
world
That's the
of reality.
model, right?
This self I call the ego. But ego is never the master of self, for we are constantly bedeviled by powerful unconscious forces in our being.
So we have a psychological
Before
determinism
ego
or
developed
biological determinism.
there was id. Id. Id is all that is primitive and infantile
It
within
is
us.
the will to life.
Id
Comes
is
from
the blind
Schopenhauer.
instincts of sexual desire and aggression. Id is opposed by another force that I call superego.
He looks white. The other one looks red. So let's remember
Superego
God, ego, superego, id,
punishing and repressing.
The Russian
Sexual
reporter or
Inheritance of
something.
the repression of our
and
parents,
aggressive
and the
force, killer
restrictions
instinct.
that are part of the society we grow up in. So I found there are three distinct elements in our personalities.
Just remember that model, right?
Who deals with the world of reality,
Relative as it appears
but
to
who is
them.
also constantly affected by the demands of id and superego.
Just what do you mean you're not sure, David? Either you've got a
That's
firm
the
commitment
dean.
from Robert,
Hate
or
him.
you haven't. Now, which is it? I happen to be in the position where I've got to know.
Well, Mr. Cooper, I'm certain he made a commitment. He didn't give anything in writing.
Oh, he didn't give you anything in writing.
Smash him. Smash him.
I'll kill you, Father.
That's the killer instinct.
Honor, Father.
And he can bring me back for instance. Now, don't interrupt me when I'm telling you how.
Your father is a good man, David. Everyone knows that. Honor thy father. Honor thy father. Honor thy father.
I hate him.
Comes
I
from the
hate him.
Bible.
Honor thy father. Honor thy father, or you will be punished.
You stole Mummy away from me. I'm taking your mother away on a holiday, David. I hate him. I'll kill him. Oh, I love him.
Mr. Cooper, I'll go and see Mr. Robertson again. Thank you for letting me explain.
David's hate for Mr. Cooper is based on unconscious hate of his own father, caused by childhood jealousy, by the Oedipus complex. Freud said that without insight into these dark forces, we are doomed to play out our lives in an endless dramatization of our childhood relations with our parents.
It's great to be alone with you, Peggy.
In a restaurant?
Well, you know what I mean. Every time I go to your place, there's your roommate. Doesn't she ever go out?
Sometimes.
That's a nice dress, Peggy.
Thank you, David.
I want.
Of the libidin side of the id, the will to life.
I want.
David, little gentleman, don't stare at ladies. You know better than that. Honor thy mother. Honor thy mother.
That's the Decalogue.
Would you like something to eat?
No, thanks. I've already eaten.
Oh, I want. There, David, baby. Put your head on Mummy's breast. I want. Warm.
It's kind of boring here, isn't it?
Where else could we go, David?
I don't know. Do you have any ideas?
Well, we could go back to my place.
I want. Warm. I want. Oh, I want.
Honor thy mother.
So
David?
conflicts between that produces
David?
the neurosis.
What are you doing down in the basement with your sister?
Yeah, let's go.
But you're sure it's all right? I mean, you're sure your roommate, huh?
Yes.
Our childhood relations with our parents, said Freud, govern all our later affections and often fill them with anxiety. David obviously has little sense of his own identity. Ego's job is to meet the conflicting demands of reality, id, and superego, and still preserve its
Those
own true
conflicting
identity.
things which
The struggles
then
between
produce the neurosis
id
or the
and
psychosis.
superego can be the source of our growth and progress as individuals.
So the tensions
But
are not
only
always
if we
bad,
are aware
right?
of them and understand. Without that understanding of those half-tamed demons that live within us, we are enslaved by our unconscious drives and emotions. We are victims of our own past.
So he wants to liberate people, right? So he is part of the
Our adult
Enlightenment.
lives are profoundly
He is a
influenced
great
by the
enlightener.
primitive emotions of our early years. This idea, revolutionary in Freud's own time, now is basic to man's understanding of himself and his civilization.
Let's hope so.
Our awareness of these powerful forces at work in our unconscious minds may frighten us. But that knowledge may also liberate us. For now at least we can understand the origins of our irrational acts. In discovering these origins, Freud did not become cynical about man. He made man understandable without making him contemptible.
That's quite an accomplishment. It's very Jewish.
I have no consolation to offer, and very little hope. I offer only a limited sort of freedom. Freedom from illusion and from infantile attachments to the past. I propose the most difficult of all achievements. To be realistic about yourselves and to preserve your individual self from the savage powers within you and in your society.
The little gods there. Egyptian gods. Indian gods. Okay, very good. See you next Wednesday. Take some cookies. Enjoy yourself. Can you turn it back to the... Can you make it normal again? Normalcy?
No problem.
Here. I know what to do.
The minute I heard him say he'd seen his lawyers, I felt a pulse chill.
So I'll be ready for you. Well, on Saturday, do we meet on Saturday?
Saturday we meet, and
Now,
then
as you know, we are meeting on Saturdays. You get a free lunch there. You are all invited, right? You get your tuition back. Part of it.